going to start out really easy.
Good question. Right off the bat. Well, I can start and
I'll start.
Use the microphone, please.
I can't hear.
does it work?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it is on.
It's just a little bit.
You can start. You're a veteran.
Yeah. I can only speak for the House and for myself. The governor's budget as proposed today would not pass the House, I do not believe. There's a couple of big concerns for me, and the first one is the business-to-business tax. I think that is going to be something that we discuss a lot, and I think its chances of getting through the House are not great. I think it could do a lot of harm to our businesses, and we want to make sure that we grow jobs here and that they don't leave. And I see there's a camera in the back. Could you stand up and introduce yourself and tell us where you're from?
Certainly. I'm from, my name's Tom, and I'm from the Minnesota Jobs Coalition. Is there a problem?
No.
Oh, okay.
Just wanted to introduce you, know we're being filmed. Thanks.
Well, like you mentioned in your question, is it Joe?
Yep.
Joe, it is the governor's budget, so it's a starting place of a conversation that needs to happen in terms of all the different components of the proposal. And if you have specific questions, that's why we have Myron Franz here, because he is really in Office of Management and Budget to really answer specific questions on court areas. But for me, I do also have, I share Representative Rosenthal's concern with the business-to-business sales tax, just making sure that we are not putting our businesses in a disadvantage competitively, although I do see that the governor also is thinking about how to help businesses with the lowering of the income, corporate income tax is something I look favorably. So there's things in there that are good for business and things that are questionable in terms of, my background is in business, and I know that a lot of times those costs that are absorbed at the end of the day, they end up being consumer costs. So I'm concerned about, at the end of the day, are we hurting the people who we want to support and help, middle class Minnesotans? So there's still going to be a lot more debate about particulars, but overall, I agree. I don't think the budget is going to pass as is. It's just a starting point for a long conversation about all these different proposals. And those are just a few of the big concerns, I think, that I share.
And then I have a second part to my question. So I'm very good friends with a business owner, successful IT consultant, has a lot of contracts out here, and he's got, I think, probably about 20 employees, and he recently brought on an employee about 2 years ago, and with all the taxes, he was just breaking even with that employee. But now with all the increase of taxes, he had to let that employee go, and he can't hire anyone. And as a recent grad who graduated college in 3 years from a fantastic school, applying to jobs nearly every day, I work at Lifetime Fitness, and I make $8 an hour. So I sunk $250 grand into a degree, which is pretty much impossible to get a job, and a lot of small business owners can't create jobs. What are grads going to do, and what are small businesses going to do? What do we do when we can't find jobs?
I can start that. Well, that is one of the concerns that I have as well. And that's why there's much more debate to be had in terms of how these proposed tax increases will hurt or help the economy and job creation. So that's certainly something that I'm going to be looking for. So, one of the things that I do support in the governor's budget that does help folks that are coming up and graduating from higher ed is the governor's plan to decrease student tuition. So I think we've been cutting higher ed drastically over the last few years, and we have to reinvest. And I think, you know, I'm a young professional, and I still have loans, so I sympathize. And we're just making it harder for people to come through. We expect them to graduate from high school, we expect them to go through college, and then we expect them to contribute to society, but we're adding all these extra burdens, and we have to invest in education, and I think that's something that I would support in the governor's proposal, and certainly in the investments in higher ed, and the other piece is that there's going to be more collaboration between businesses and higher ed to make sure that we are preparing our students and our future workforce to tie into the job market. So those are things that I certainly are good steps in the right direction to address some of the issues that you have. But immediately, I think you're right, we have concerns about how the impact of our decisions today will impact your ability to have a job today, because you can't wait 5 or 10 years until to see the fruits of this budget. We also have immediate needs, so I thank you for your concerns, and I'm writing notes too about all of your concerns, and I'd love to follow up with you as well.
But if you decrease tuition, wouldn't they just increase other fees, like food and all that kind of stuff?
You know, I sit on the higher ed committee, and I campaigned on this issue. Tuition has doubled in this state over the last 10 years, and it's just not sustainable. We have kids graduating with tons and tons of debt on their shoulders, and the job prospects for them are not very great to pay them back in the near term. In the long term, we hope to stabilize the state and build the state back up so there are good paying jobs and employers will want to hire you. And thank you for going through the school system. The amount of debt that you've put in is outrageous, and we need to do better, because the state has always done best because we've had an educated workforce, and that workforce has attracted business, and we want to continue to do so. And I'd like to include the commissioner and Margaret in the conversation if you'd like to be.
Well, you raised some really good questions, Jill. I think you have to look at this both on the macro and on the micro. I mean, on one hand, Minnesota is recovering from the recession faster than the rest of the country, which is a good thing. But on the other hand, you have situations where people are looking for jobs in their what they graduated in their field that they want to try to find, and they can't find those kind of jobs. So I think one of the keys is that I don't think any of the legislators or the governor I know is not happy with the amount of unemployment that we have. And I think the key is trying to move forward. One of the things that's happened in this last decade or so is that as we had two recessions. You know, the early 2000s we had a recession, and then in 2008 we had another recession. And these things take a really heavy toll. And I think one of the things that what's happened is with some of our budget balancing things we've done in the past, we've taken some one-time fixes. And I think the governor believes that we really need to have a sustainable budget so that we have a regular flow of revenue to fund education in a way that's sufficient so you don't have to borrow. Did you say 250,000?
I went to Boston University, so
Yeah.
it's about 50 grand a year, and I'm getting my master's at St. Thomas,
Yeah.
which is
No,
20 a year.
that's real money. And so, I mean, the key is we've got to do something to really, adjust that in the long term. If we don't make the kind of commitments now to change the course of our budget cycles so that we have sufficient revenue, we don't keep cutting education, it's just going to get worse and worse. I think that Representative Rosenthal on the Education Committee is really key. I think he's seen a lot of things there where we really need to invest. So the governor's budget is designed to invest both for the short term and solve the budget, but also for the long term.
I'll just add the specifics to what Commissioner France said, in that the governor is proposing almost $200 million in higher education to address the cost of tuition at the University of Minnesota and at Minsky. And he's putting money into the state grant program so that more students will be eligible for state grants, and so that the state grant will go farther so you don't have to borrow as much to try and bring down that average cost of debt for students. He's also investing almost $100 million in job growth and the economy in terms of creating funds and tools for our Commissioner of Economic Development to bring businesses to Minnesota and to encourage businesses that are in Minnesota to grow and expand here, with the goal of creating over 10,000 jobs with the investment that he's making.
Great, thank you. So our next question from the audience is, what effect will new taxes on business services or business-to-business services have on the Minnesota economy?
That was for you.
Want me to start?
If you'd like.
Well, let me set the stage, and then I think it'd be helpful to have both Senator Franzen and Representative Rosenthal respond. The goal of the governor's budget package was to, as I mentioned in this, Margaret Kelly, the budget director, said, was to balance the budget fairly and honestly. So first of all, we had to solve the $1.1 billion deficit, and then we needed to make the investments that Margaret talked about, the $1 billion in education and infrastructure, and then we need to pay back the schools. We have a $1.1 billion school debt. So that's $3 billion right there that we need to deal with. Now, when we put together the tax package, we looked at 4 different areas: the income tax, the corporate income tax, the property tax, and also the sales tax. And so the question really deals with the sales tax component. But the 4 components were really were designed to be dealt together as a package, because there are some things some people like, as the senator mentioned and the representative mentioned. There's some things they like and there's some things they're not so happy about. Well, we designed it that way, frankly, because if you're raising revenue, you've got to have people have some skin in the game, and everyone needs to participate in some fashion. The expansion of the sales tax was based upon trying to get the sales tax down as low as we could. We have a 6.875% statewide sales tax rate. It's the 7th highest in the country. So by dropping it to 5.5%, we're able to make it the 27th highest in the country, or we're in the bottom half, which is a good place to be for that tax. But in order to do that, we expanded the base. Minnesota has one of the most narrow sales tax bases in the country, certainly in this region. That's one of the reasons we have such a high rate. The smaller the base you have, the higher the rate you have to generate money. So we wanted to reduce the sales tax rate by 20% down to 5.5%. Now, in the process of doing that, we expanded the sales tax to include new consumer items. Right now, if you go buy a book at a store, you pay sales tax on the book, but if you download that book in a digital format, you don't have to pay sales tax on that. So we wanted to equalize the treatment of those things. We wanted to expand the sales tax into those areas. Some consumer services. We tax some consumer services, but not others. For example, I think this is right, we tax pet grooming services, but not human grooming services, or haircuts. We have some really kind of strange distinctions that we've made over time. Well, the sales tax was implemented in 1967. At the time, 2/3 of all purchases were for goods at that time, and now, in this day and age, 2/3 of all consumer purchases are for services. So we wanted to expand the sales tax to include both consumer services and business professional services. So I'm finally getting to the question, but I wanted to set the stage, so I apologize for that. But anyway, so business to business services, why did we expand to that, and what kind of an effect is it going to have? Well, if you would listen to the business people, they will say that it's catastrophic and it's going to end Minnesota as we know it. Well, you know, that's been said many times over the last 30 or 40 years, over every time we've tried to implement some new idea or some new tax. And you know what? Minnesota is still here, and Minnesota is doing quite well. The idea behind the business-to-business tax was to try to figure out some way so that business services are included in our sales tax, because they make up a big portion of our economy. So, you know, it's at a lower rate. It's at 5.5%. And there are a lot of businesses that their service really is the final sale. And that's really not much of a problem, I think, for most of those businesses. Some businesses are concerned that when they sell a business service from one business to another business and they sell the product, that there's a cascading effect of sales taxes. And that's something we're looking at. So we're looking at this in terms of the complexity, but you know, businesses don't like it, but businesses aren't taxed now, so of course they don't like it. I'm not dismissing their claims. We're concerned about it. We want to make sure it works effectively, but that's something that we're working on, and we're trying to, I've been meeting. You can't tell you how many times I've met with different businesses, different business groups, to try to get their ideas about how to make it better. But that's enough. I'll let you guys respond.